Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Write or Die Show. I'm your host, Randi-lee. On today's episode, we have a returning guest from episode 46. It is Peter Topside. If you have not already hit that like and subscribe button, do it now. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So, for those of you who don't know, this is one of the lovely guests who was on at the beginning of the show, and I absolutely love his books. We'll talk about those later. But he's going to still introduce himself again for those of you who are brand new to the show. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
All right. Well, my pen name is Peter Topside. I'm a self-published horror writer. I've been in the game for just about 2.5 years now. So I'm still kind of, new kid on the block. When I'm not writing, I'm a clinical exercise physiologist by trade and education. I also am a self-taught chef and baker, and I have a little girl, and I'm happily married and all that kind of good stuff. So nice and simple.
Excellent. I love simple. So for anybody who has not watched the episodes at the beginning of the show, go back, check out episode 46, and then you'll get a whole lot more story about this wonderful author. So what do you want to share with us today?
Well, as of yesterday, the third and final book in the Preternatural trilogy, Reckoning, officially came out, and that was kind of the conclusion of a more than 25-year journey. So I was really like over the moon about it yesterday. I almost didn't know how to react when I woke up and I saw the book was live on Amazon. I was like, wow, this is really happening.
Yep.
But yeah, no, it's the end of the book. It's the definitive conclusion. Everything is wrapped up nicely, and hopefully it came across that way.
I think so. So I felt very special because I got a copy before the release date. Oh, and it was a physical copy this time. So I felt very special. And so I read it all. Everyone can go check out my review on the blog, rbwriting.ca, and see what I had to say about that. As well, of course, I have already reviewed the first two books, and those are on the blog too. But what I love about your characters in the book, and okay, let me preface this by saying, because we have already had Peter on the show before, I had a brain fart because I'm using your pen name and I know your real name, and then I'm like having a brain fart. So let me start that again. Because we have already had Peter on the show before, we're going to delve a little bit more into the mental health aspects that he uses in his books. So they are horror, but there are some really cool mental health aspects that he puts forth in his characters. And I'm guessing that he gets some of that from his life experiences. So if you want to hear more about his story specifically, go back episode 46, like I said. So today we're going to delve into those characters just so that we're not talking about the same thing, right? So like you said, it's a trilogy. It's 3 books. So right from the start, when you first meet those characters, a little bit of their mental health kind of comes out, right? Yeah. So tell everybody a little bit about, we won't give away the story, but tell people where the characters are at the beginning.
So in the very first book, you mean?
Yeah.
So in the first book, it kind of goes in a lot of different directions. It's introducing you to this town called Meadowsville, which is like a picture perfect, almost think of like, if you remember the Edward Scissorhands movie, where like you see the town and everything, like the lawns all are perfect, the houses are uniform, but then you have just this really big eyesore, and that's where our main character lives. It's sort of a similar concept to that. It's like a really beautiful place on the, if you were driving through, you'd be like, wow, this looks like just a really amazing, town to live in. It's got everything, everyone looks happy and all that, but there's been kind of an ongoing issue since the beginnings of it. You have this character named Mr. Smith, who is more or less a vampire, and he's kind of got a stronghold on the town. They're fully aware that he's there. They basically just coexist with it. There's a very strong codependency there where he's doing these really vicious, nasty things to the children of the town, and they just kind of let it slide because it gets the town attention. It brings tourism in.
And tourism equals money.
Right. So that's why the town looks so great, because they're pulling in all this money, but they're like, well, we have a population of 75,000. If we lose maybe a couple dozen a year, all right, whatever. We could just blame it on the tourists doing something weird, or it could be an animal attack. So they can just pass it off, write it off, and again, everyone in the town is complicit with that. So in the town, you have our main character in the first book, David, who's coming from a very troubled upbringing. He's got a very abusive, alcoholic father, a very depressed mother. He kind of takes hits from his teachers at school. He suffers from some very severe forms of anxiety and depression. Even the church he goes to is very abusive towards him. And then the kid basically can't catch a break. So you're taking somebody who's already in a very, soft place, mental health wise, and you're just piling, more and more on their shoulders, which is only going to result in a crash at some point.
Which very much reflects real life, I think, right? Like so many of us, when we're dealing with our mental health, we're coming from this really bad place. And if we don't seek help at that time and more gets piled on, we do end up crashing. And that's what I'm loving about your characters. That's why I was like, let's talk about the characters today, because they very closely parallel real life in this completely absurd non-reality of monsters and whatnot. But yeah, it's very interesting. So continue.
Yeah. No, it's and again, I'm glad I came across well, because I was trying to fit a lot into these books. So,
I could tell you they definitely could have been longer, but then I think personally, I think they're written for like that teen kind of audience. And so if they were too much longer, then you would have lost them.
Right. My attention span is somewhat like a goldfish too. So I always notice, like, when I have books over 200 pages, I always start to wander after that 200 page mark. I just have like a block there.
Yeah, but, exactly.
But like I said, that was David. He's pretty much the main focus of the first book, and you find out at some point Mr. Smith had passed away from natural causes, and vampires in this universe do kind of age out at some point, even though their abilities extend them a bit. They can still die of natural causes. And he is almost mentored by our main antagonist, whose name is Blackheart. Now, that's not, of course, his real name. He was a human at some point, but he is was one of the victims of this Mr. Smith character, who abused him and did really horrible things. And he took over the mantle when Smith died. And again, that is almost like idealizing an abuser, which again is more kind of that mental health aspect worked in.
Exactly. And it's very, again, very realistic when you grow up in that environment. That's all you know, right? So actually, me and my husband were just talking about this the other day, about how, now I wasn't abused the way that the book characters were, but as a young kid, I thought it was normal for people to be yelling in the house, for there to be a lot of drama in the house, because my mom's ex-husband was an alcoholic, and my brother was really into drugs and stuff. So I thought, this was normal for me. So I didn't think anything different of it until later on in life. And so the skills that I learned as a teenager, as a kid, weren't really helpful. They were very codependent. Like as an adult, I would still call my mom at 19, 20 years old. I'd call my mom, can you make me a doctor's appointment? Because I didn't even know how to do that. I was very codependent on my mom for a very long time. And it wasn't until I started making changes for myself that I was able to learn new things. And now I can look back and go, wow, that was really unhealthy. But that's how I was taught. So that's what I knew. So just like in the book, I mean, Blackheart was basically raised by Mr. Smith, even though, he took him and did unspeakable things. That's what he knew from a young age. So he turns into what Mr. Smith was basically grooming him to be. And there's another parallel as well, grooming. Mr.
Right.
Smith groomed him to become this thing, and that's often what um, psychopaths or things like that will do, is they'll groom their victims.
Yep.
Oh.
And that's the thing with Blackheart. You know, you're absolutely spot on. He's raised in this certain situation. He's just made, and again, think of like a little kid. You know, Smith kills his parents. As a little boy, Blackheart's praying for God to save him from this tyrant, and it never happens. And he's made to watch. And again, I'm not going to spoil anything. Made to watch and have done things to him that are really just things that will make your stomach turn. But again, you just put somebody in that situation that's the right kind of mixture, and you have a really nasty result. So
exactly.
when you come into the first, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I know I said that it's well written for teens. I think teens would be good. Don't worry, it doesn't go into super graphic detail. You get the idea of what the issues are without super graphic details. So yes, you can still give this to your 16, 17-year-old.
Right. Yeah.
I just wanted to preface that.
Yeah, that was something when I was getting putting the book out to be published. I remember there was an option on Amazon that says they're adult content. And I think with the first book, I clicked yes, because it's obviously there's some language, it's violent, there's some themes in there that are kind of heavy. But I was told later on that adult themes mean something very different than what I was thinking. And those are the things that, again, not spoiling anything, but there are certain very trigger-inducing themes in the books that I do not go into much detail. Randy said it spot on, like it's addressed, you know what happened, but it is not detailed at all. So I don't get into anything super, super graphic in that sense.
Which I appreciated, because I mean, I know that these terrible things would have had to have happened to Blackheart in order for it to go the way it did. Right. But I really didn't want to have to read it because it's awful, right? So I think that you did a very good job of just making sure that the audience knows, but not so bad that we want to close the book and say goodbye.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was very careful. And again, I'm glad that came across that way. But again, like I was saying, so Blackheart's our main antagonist, and basically, as we're going through the books, we see how he has taken over the mantle for Mr. Smith. He's still holding the same routine of killing residents of the town. He's manipulating, certain women, and he has like a certain methodology to his routine. And he eventually takes David under his wing, and he's trying to, basically make David his successor, almost recreate what Smith did with him and make David his next victim, but also to succeed him at some point.
Again, that grooming.
Right. And it shows how, again, David coming from his abusive situation, he doesn't really know what to do. Doesn't have any support. He's now become a vampire. And this Blackheart character is so efficient at manipulating people. Like, this is what he does. He's done it thousands and thousands of times. So he can literally, walk up to somebody, size them up, and he could talk them into doing anything he wants. And it's at their own free will. And it's pretty much like gaslighting people and making them fall under this guise that he's there to be something special and helpful for them, but he's actually doing things to get them to kind of do his bidding, and what's going to benefit him.
Yeah, think of almost like Dracula when he, does the eye is to make you just do what he wants.
Yeah, similar,
do, right?
Right.
But he's not hypnotizing them in that sense, really.
Correct, right. Yeah. It's more real world, and even though he's a vampire, he took some liberties. Of course, he's just literally, if you've ever almost think of like a Hannibal Lecter character.
He could vampire adjacent.
Right. So there's David, there's Blackheart, there's Alexandra, who surprisingly was never meant to be the main focus of the story. She was always supposed to be a secondary character. So she was one of the pastor's daughters, or one of the daughter of a pastor in the town, and she comes into contact with David when he kind of has his eventual crash with things going on with the Blackheart. Her and her father take him in. They kind of almost reintroduce him to religion and what God is there to help him with, and just kind of gives him for the first time in his life a lot of clarity. And he develops a very deep friendship with Alexandra. The second book shifts more into the events of the first book years later, how it impacts Alexandra at that point, which again, I'm trying not to spoil anything.
Yeah. What I love, I'll help you to not spoil.
Yeah.
What I love is that because the book takes it's what, like 10 years later is that one? Or is that the one after
15.
that? 15. Okay.
15.
Yeah. So a significant amount of time has passed. So if you think about your own life, when 15 years ago for me, I was a teenager, well, almost an adult, but what am I going to say? So I was a teenager, and I look at my life then, and I look at I'm a totally different person. And so what I loved about the book is that your characters did grow. We don't know exactly what happened to them during that time, but you could tell there was development, there was growth. They had aged, which was really nice because again, we're paralleling um, reality in some senses here. And so I thought that was really neat because as we go into this second book and we know all the tragedies that happened in the first book, it wasn't like sometimes you read a book, right? And they're just power on and they're fine and they're the exact same that they always were. But you can tell that there were scars left, a lot of scars left, which is really important because, I mean, both of us have talked about some of our tragic backstories. Again, episode 46. And and there's scars left over that we have to deal with, 15 years later or however many years later, just like in the book.
Right. Absolutely. And not that I didn't want to skip over the other main character is Christian Reed. So basically he's just a regular guy. His parents were killed by Blackheart when he was much younger, but he kind of fell into the same mindset as the town. He kind of was very compliant as well, thinking like, well, I've heard these legends. I was little, maybe I was just traumatized and imagined what I saw. He was raised by relatives, and then he has his own family who is directly impacted by this partnership between David and Blackheart in the first book.
Yeah.
And he takes a very big loss, and he kind of, again, another person much like David, he's not on the most stable grounds mental health wise, and the loss he takes puts him over the top, and he goes after the vampires, and he gets really banged up physically and mentally. And then when we revisit him in the second book, Alexandra is very much grieving the loss of her friend with David. Christian is still grieving his loss. He never got the proper treatment or was proactive to address these things. So now he's very much an alcoholic, and he's potentially abusing, his medications, and he's very abusive to the people around him. And he's almost kind of, again, I'll use that word idolize, Blackheart in the way that he was so traumatized by what happened by the end of the first book that he almost takes over the mantle for Blackheart in the second book in certain ways. He almost becomes a little bit of a tyrant, which is not necessarily what happened, but it's very comparable. And and Alexandra, again, she's grieving. Blackheart ends up returning in the second book in kind of a unique way. He's got different abilities. You can tell that's why the book's named Evolution, because all these characters are evolving. Some for not good reasons, others for good reasons.
And that's why I say he's vampire adjacent.
Right.
He's got that look, and like in the first book, that's what you think. You're like, okay, vampire. But as you read, you're like, not quite. So vampire adjacent is the best I can come up with for that one. And there was something that you were saying. Yeah. So when Christian doesn't seek the help, right? Let's again, because the show is all about mental health. I always want to bring it back and parallel our real life experiences here. And as we are watching him basically deteriorate in this book because he doesn't seek help, I know for me, before I went to therapy, and I'm sure lots of people have this very similar story, my entirety of being was deteriorating. Like my mental health was totally gone. But when that's gone, then you start not taking care of your body. Then you start not taking care of your emotions, and everything kind of falls. And you very much see that in the second book with Christian, which again, I'm going, wow, that was me before I went and sought help. So it's another really good way to show people that, hey, this is what could happen to you without having to read somebody's memoir. Because, and I mean, I write nonfiction. That's what I mostly write, and I love it. However, some people absolutely hate reading other people's life stories. It's a fact. So when an author such as yourself can come up with a story that it parallels the message that I've been sharing with people for years now, it's like, sweet, there's another resource out there that people can read, and they're not having to read somebody's real life. They can still stay in sort of a non-reality, but you can very much see real things happening in these characters' lives.
Right, right. And one of the things I know we talked about last time, all of the situations in the story, all the characters, they're loosely based on people I've either, either friends, family, relatives, people directly involved in my life growing up to this point, or they were parts of me at certain points as well. And that was important that I stick with that because, for me to try to write, a different, for instance, like a different culture or something that I don't have any experience with, I'm just kind of like doing some loose research, and I'm like, hey, let me take a stab at this. No pun intended, but like to me, it wouldn't be honest. Like when there's going to be a loss of that genuineness that would be seen in the writing, because you don't have the firsthand experience. You don't know how these characters would respond to certain things or react to certain things with their basis of trauma and anxiety and depression. So again, that was really important to me to make sure I stayed in my scope in a sense.
Yeah. And I think that comes across. I really do. So so as the second book goes along, and I'm not gonna lie, the second book was my least favorite out of the three. But again, it was necessary to show the downfall of some of those main characters before the ending. Right. So, but I mean, if you have to pick a favorite and a least favorite, then that's the way it's going to go. So as the book goes, right, and you think it's all wrapped up at the end, as books tend to do, just like the first one, you think it's all wrapped up, but then there's another one, so you think it's all wrapped up, and then we go into the third book. So this is, again, time has passed, and the characters are having to rebuild their lives. The town is having to rebuild itself, just like in the past, but more severely, I feel like, after what happened at the end of the second book. And again, you can see a major shift in the mental health of the town and of the characters. So talk to us about the shift in the characters in this one.
So by the third book, the town has now suffered a pretty big couple of, at that point, it'd been basically 16 years since the first book originally happened. By the third book, Christian has turned his life around. He's much more stable. He's repairing a lot of the damage that he had done to his wife and his son at that point from the events of the second book specifically. And again, Alexandra is kind of our main focus from the end of the first book on, and what she's really kind of, the second book was really focused on her and making her into that strong, respected leader that she always had in her. But she just wasn't ever able to kind of get past some of her insecurities and her other mental health concerns and such to get there. And the events of the first book kind of like, not so politely, shove her into that role, and she is willing and able to succeed in doing that. So it, like I said, you have this strong character in Alexandra. Christian is now a good support for her and his family. Blackheart, again, finds a very otherworldly way to return, and he brings back with him Mr. Smith. And there is obviously some callbacks to the original story between him and Smith here. And again, some of it does lean heavily on the mental health aspect of things. There is a lot of religious aspects to this, but there is a balance, of course. It doesn't become like too preachy or too
No, I didn't feel like
anything.
anything was
Yeah,
being shoved down my throat. It was that balance of good and evil.
right, right. And yeah, I mean, by the third book, you've seen basically it's the end of the arcs of each of these characters. They each have, as I said earlier, like a definitive ending where
Yeah.
this is the end of their story. This is where they ended up. This is what happened, and you know why it happened.
Yeah, which I loved, and I said that in my blog because I loved that everything kind of wrapped up nicely, and each character had the ending I think that they each deserved. So the other thing I want to say is that when we're talking about Christian, we're talking about Blackheart. They are the same in a sense. They are two sides of the same coin, really, because they both had tragedy and awfulness. Eventually, Christian gets help, right, between the second and third book there.
Mhm.
But Blackheart never does. Right. So you
Right.
can see these two individuals that are similar in that sense. And this is what happens if you don't seek help. And this is what happens if you do seek help. So it's almost like sharing the message of reaching out for help for your mental health without shoving it down somebody's throat, without saying, oh, I think you're kind of crazy. I think you need to go get help. Like, because that's not going to work. Like, let's be real. That's just not going to work. But to
But that
show
sounds
those,
so genuine.
right? I know. But when you see those parallels of those two main characters, and it's like, wow, this guy could have sought help, but he chose not to, and now he's completely hated and he's evil, and everybody wants to kill him. And then you have
Mhm.
this person that you're like, people didn't like you for a while there. You were kind of a turd, but you know what? You got help, and I think you're an all right person now. You're pretty chill. You're pretty cool,
Right.
right? So again, it's just those parallels, so many parallels throughout the book, which is that's why I liked it, is because there was all those parallels.
And just the kind of, and again, I'm really, really happy it was put across and came across that way. But, I wrote it, and when I say it took over 25 years, I'm my own worst enemy, and that's probably my OCD and my anxiety,
Yeah.
all these things I've dealt with for a very long time. I really wanted to make sure the book was layered, and I wanted to write it so that all these things I wanted to work in, some of the religious aspects, the mental health aspects,
Mm-hmm.
all of it was put across so that, if you're just somebody who wants to read a book and be like, hey, I want to read a horror book, you would still enjoy it.
Yeah.
However, if you want to sit there and be like, all right, let me piece some of this stuff together and maybe dive deeper into it, almost like you would do like a college course.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hidden things in there, and there's a lot of symbolism, and
Yes.
you could spend months just trying to find all these little nuggets I stuck in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why it sounds like a long time to write 3 books, but that's why it took so long, because there was a lot of things I was trying to fit in coherently and reasonably.
Yeah. No, I think it came across well, and yeah, you can definitely dissect it. It'd be a great book for like a novel study at school or something, because there's a lot of
Right.
pieces that you could talk about. So that was really cool. And yeah, the ending just summed it up. So basically, I'm trying to think of the best way to word this now, but my mind is like, you know? So with writing this book, and you finally got it out, you finally got the 3 books out, they're out of your brain, even though I want a prequel.
You never know.
Give me the prequel. And so how do you feel now, having been able to get that out? Because again, you had said it a lot of this was from past experiences or people that you met and stuff like that. So how's it feel?
uh, that's a big question.
I
um,
know.
so I remember when I wrote the first book, and the original version I wrote was it was much more intense. It was much more, it was very different than what the version is today. And I really do obviously like the current version better than the previous, but
Yeah.
I remember when I wrote it, and I fit too much stuff in it. It became too like overwhelmed with ideas. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't like this, and I'm going to just start from scratch and rewrite it. And I only intended on writing the one book. So when I finished it, I was just kind of like, wow, I feel like I wrote about my life and parts of my life and all these things, and it just, there was no clarity. It just kind of ended. It didn't have
Yeah.
like a great ending either. And I'm like, all right. And I sat on it for a few years, and then I just started piecing together. I'm like, okay, the second book, and let me dive into what would be the aftermath of the first book, and let's see the blowback to these characters.
Yeah.
And it felt a little bit more cathartic at that point. And it's obviously writing and things like that, creative arts and creative arts therapies, they're very research driven as far as benefiting mental health and managing anxieties and such. So when I eventually wrote the second book, I felt like, okay, I feel better, but I still feel like there's something else there.
Yeah.
And then the third book creeped out. And then when I was writing the rough draft and I was almost done with the third book, I just kept thinking, like, I don't know how the hell I'm going to end it. Like, I don't have I had everything outlined and detailed up to the last like two chapters, and I'm typing and I'm like, I have no idea how I'm going to get out of this hole. Um, and it bothered me. It really made my anxiety and everything get kind of crazy, because I wanted this not only just for my potential audience and readers, but again, I use that word cathartic for my own sake. I really wanted to wrap this up and kind of put to bed certain things that had lingered in my brain, again, past traumas and experiences that were in these books. I really wanted to wrap it up and accurately show, with all this symbolism and all these things happening, what a good ending could be. Because
Yeah.
you don't just want to leave it like, okay, and we'll zoom out. Blackheart is technically like the mental illness, and the
Yeah.
town is like its victim. And you just keep thinking you're getting rid of it, but you're not really doing much about it. And you're hoping it goes away, but it's going to keep coming back. And that's again, you zoom out. That was the other layered concept here. But by the end, the characters, they all find their way. They all are able to fix themselves, and not, maybe fix isn't the best word, but manage themselves and stabilize themselves.
Yeah.
And life continues, and life is better than it ever was for them, because even though it's scary as they're now embarking on these new lifestyles, they know it's better, they feel better about it, and it just yields those results where, like, yeah, it's scary getting treatments, it's scary taking medications, and talking about your deepest feelings with the therapists and psychiatrists and all these mental health people. It's scary as hell, and I can say that because I've done it quite a bit. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. As you learn these strategies, as you get yourself stabilized and on a good treatment plan, you feel better, your life improves drastically, and you don't just have to sit there and be afraid of what could happen to set me off tomorrow or the next week, or is something going to happen at work. Like, again, light at the end of the tunnel. It's intense, but everyone can get there. It's just a matter of finding what's going to work for each individual and their circumstances.
Yeah. That's perfect. So what is a coping strategy that you can share with the audience? Because we always have to give at least one. What's a good coping strategy we can share?
Coping strategy. Writing is definitely up there.
That was actually my first thought. I was like, oh, he's going to say writing because you've said writing's cathartic. And I mean, it is. So yeah, it's funny because that was exactly what I thought you were going to say.
That's good. That's good. Great minds think alike.
Right?
So, no, writing is definitely up there. One of the management strategies that my therapist and I worked on for many years was staying grounded, because I am very much a person that has trouble staying in the present moment. I'm either thinking about something that happened, yesterday, a year ago, 10 years ago, or something that could happen tomorrow or next year. And it really disorients you. It makes anxiety worse, and it's all wasted energy, because I don't have a DeLorean with Doc Brown ready to zoom me around, space and time.
Oh, you don't? I thought you did.
Believe it or not, I've written letters to Santa Claus. It just never came. But but it's wasted energy. It's definitely, keeping yourself present. It sounds like a really easy, silly concept, but try it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's easier said than done.
right. So things like even something simple like breathing. Breathing is something most people do improperly.
Yeah.
And that was something before I originally got, myself stabilized. I was not breathing much at all. And that makes your anxiety symptoms worse. Your heart rate goes
Hmm.
up, your blood pressure goes up, you feel again disoriented and dizzy and more angry. It's a horrible feeling. But for me, doing something like learning how to breathe and staying grounded, which that enables me to do, that is probably the thing I use many, many times each day. And it's hard, especially when things are stressful, but it's something I really force myself to focus on, and it's a great way for me to again keep myself in check.
Yeah. Excellent. So what are you going to be working on next? Do you know yet? Prequel.
So that's a good question. In the third book, I I kind of did a little bit of world building, very brief stuff where other
Yes.
towns
The
might
other
get
towns are
mentioned,
mentioned.
and there is a sheet of scrap paper, my little idea pad, as I like to call it. um, and when I was writing the third book, I had a couple of ideas pop into my head, and it was one of those like what if things. Like I could write other stories that happen in the same world as what
Yeah.
happened in the Preternatural trilogy, but also could have nothing to do with the trilogy. But
Yeah.
they're established as of the end of the third book.
Yeah.
Um, and that's not to say I necessarily will develop them, but the option is left there if the mood strikes me at some point. But
See, now I want those too.
they're good ideas to know.
They are. I'm sure they are. And well, because you did set it up very well that the towns are mentioned and they don't cross over into Meadowsville. Like that was established. So
Right,
you could do it and not have to worry about that crossover, right?
right.
So
And that was
that
some, yeah,
yeah, that would be cool.
I was going to say that was some other symbolism in there too. Like, again, when you read some of the parts of the book, you have to suspend disbelief, but then also look into the reason I did certain things.
Yeah.
Um, and, at certain points, even throughout the first two books, but especially in the third, that the other towns around Meadowsville isolate the town. And if you ever look at somebody who's suffering from an undiagnosed, untreated mental health illness, how do the people around them act? They might make fun of them. They'd be like, oh, he's right. They'll be like, I'm gonna be over here. I don't know what's going on with you. And until you get yourself managed,
Yep.
I'm out. I'm not it. And it's the same kind of thing. These towns don't know if they're having actual issues or if they're so money hungry that they're staging all these things and just doing like
Yeah.
this big FX production. But they isolate the town, and that again resembles like a real life scenario with people that have
Hmm.
mental illness. And it's it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't catch that one, but now that you're pointing it out, I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, okay. So yeah, there, like I said, perfect novel study for a grade 12 class or something. Um,
um,
all right,
but
so yeah,
yeah, no, I was just gonna say. So to answer your question, like as of this point, I'm definitely going to take a little bit of a break from writing because I really have. It's been 2.5 years I've been just hauling it to get these
yeah,
three books out, and I'm having a really awesome time helping newer authors um, get the recognition they deserve. People who are so uber talented that you would never know they existed, and that really means a lot to me to give them good reviews and promote
yeah,
them when I'm on various platforms. And I really like helping my colleagues. But there, like I said, there are a couple of concepts, and I would like to write again. It's just
yeah,
got to be one of those things I have to really want to write the story. It has to be for a good reason, even
yeah,
if it's just a silly story. It doesn't have all these layers and depth to it.
yeah,
But yeah, it's there's like I said, there's a list, and at some point I will probably develop some others, but that timing just has to be right.
yeah. I know sometimes I talk to people, or if I'm doing an interview on somebody else's show, it's always like, how do you make sure that you write? Do you write every day? I'm like, no, I don't. I'm like, I follow my dopamine. I follow when I'm in the mood to do it. I have forced myself to get some stuff out, just like if I have a deadline I've created for myself, or I'm in the last leg of it, so just get it done, right? But for the most part, when I do that, I mean, the book doesn't turn out as good as when I'm feeling it. So no, I get that. Sometimes books will come out really fast for me, and sometimes I'll just take a break. Yeah, but I have a big whiteboard just like your paper, and I got all sorts of notes and stuff on it. So, there's so many ideas. So many ideas. So where do people follow you?
So I'm kind of all over the place. I'm on Book Club, I'm on Goodreads, under my pen name, of course, and then on Twitter, I'm at Topside. Instagram is at Topside, and then Facebook is at Topside.Peter, I believe. So a couple spins, but basically the same pen name. You'll find me.
Yep, exactly. And then you'll find the reviews that he's done for my books.
Right, all great
plug
books.
Myself in there a little bit.
I see them behind you as well. Nicely done.
Yeah, I'm trying. Eventually, so my mom just got her own place, so she's going to be moving out in the next couple weeks, and then my office is going upstairs. I'm so
wow,
excited.
Cool.
And then I'll be able to really do a background of how I want it to be and stuff. So it's going to be. I'm so excited. So excited.
Cool, nice.
So thank you for coming on the show again. Always great to chat with you, and I mean, I'm sure we'll stay in touch as we always do.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody else, make sure you pick up your copy of the final Preternatural. Well, pick up the first two too if you haven't already. Get all of them. And that's the great thing about when the final thing comes out, because when I finished reading book 1 and 2, and I was like, I need the third one now. Right? Like, I hate that. I hate when I'm watching something or I'm reading something and it's missing a piece. I'm like, but I need the end. I need the end. And the worst is when I don't know what's going to happen. So, okay. Funny story here. Me and my husband, I don't know, however many years ago this was, he's like, hey, you want to go see The Hobbit? I was like, cool, sure, I'll go see The Hobbit. I've never actually read the book. I've watched the Lord of the Rings movies and stuff, but I've never read the books. And I was like, yeah, sure, cool. And my husband's like, all right. And I don't know, he tells me the book's only, it's a small book. And the movie was not just one movie, and I didn't know that. So we come out of the first Hobbit, which is so freaking boring because all they do is sit around and talk for like 3 hours. I come out, I go, you took me to see that? Did you know that it wasn't going to actually have an ending or anything in it? He's like, no, I didn't. He's like, I didn't realize it, but I'm pretty sure he did. And he was just saying that. But I was so mad because I was like, I wouldn't have wasted money to go see this in a theater. I would have waited until the other parts were out, especially with this one, because nothing happened in the first one. Like, at least in Lord of the Rings, every single part of it had some kind of big epic part. This was not. And
I remember, this is a funny story on my end. I remember I rented the first Lord of the Rings movie and I watched it by myself. And this was, again, years and years ago when the first one came out. And I never read the books. I knew the movie was kind of long, but I remember I got an hour and a half in. I fell asleep for an hour and a half. And when I woke up, it was still going. It's like, wow, this is a commitment.
Yeah, it really is. And I was like, oh my gosh, no, thank you. I will stick to my murderous horror stories and movies, and that works for me.
Yep.
Even when there's multiple parts, you know it's going to be pretty much the same every part. He's going to come out, he's going to kill some people, and they're going to kill him, and then he's going to somehow resurrect and go about it again. So
same formula, yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. I love it. It's expected and unexpected all at the same time.
Absolutely.
All right, so thank you so much for being on the show with me again. And be sure, everybody, to be sure to go and check out the links down below to follow Peter at all of his various things.
All right, thank you so much for everything, Randy. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay, so I've stopped this streaming. Always so much fun talking with Peter. I absolutely enjoy our conversations. We ended up talking for another 20 minutes afterwards. As always, we're chatterboxes, but it was awesome. Make sure that you pick up his books. It's definitely worth the read. And check out his links down in the description below. Give him a follow on all of his awesome stuff. He's written some book reviews for me, so you want to go check those out as well. That's always a plus. And remember, the only way to end the stigma of mental health is to speak openly and honestly. Bye.